Well, some breaking news coming out of the United Kingdom, where judges have blocked government plans to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda.
Just before dawn, as government buildings across the United Kingdom lit up for another day of crisis meetings, a confidential directive quietly failed. The plan had been months in preparation, briefed in private, framed as decisive. According to internal assessments, it was meant to signal control. Instead, it triggered something far more dangerous. The mass deportation initiative never reached implementation. Court interventions arrived first, emergency filings, overnight rulings, temporary suspensions justified as procedural safeguards. Within hours, the operation stalled. Transport assets stood idle. Enforcement teams were instructed to stand down. By mid-morning, officials were no longer discussing timelines, but damage control. Critics would later describe the moment as a boiling point. Supporters called it a necessary pause. Inside the system, analysts used a different phrase altogether: loss of authority. Reports suggest the deportation plan was introduced against a backdrop of escalating pressure, border capacity stretched, accommodation sites overflowing, local councils reporting resource exhaustion, public patience thinning. For months, warnings circulated through internal channels that delay was no longer neutral. It was destabilising. When the plan was announced internally, it carried the tone of finality. A reset, accelerated removals, tighter thresholds, clear consequences. According to sources close to the situation, senior figures believed the announcement alone would calm unrest. They miscalculated. News of the blockage spread faster than the plan itself ever had. Within hours, protest calls appeared online. Counter-protests followed. Advocacy groups claimed victory. Enforcement unions warned morale was collapsing. The public, already distrustful, interpreted the reversal as confirmation that no decision could survive contact with the system. Across the country, the reaction was uneven, but intense. In some cities, demonstrations formed outside administrative buildings. In others, small confrontations broke out near transport hubs. Police presence increased, not in response to violence, but anticipation. The mood was brittle, expectant, as if everyone sensed the ground shifting beneath familiar routines. According to one internal briefing, the danger was not unrest itself, but the perception that the state no longer had the capacity to act decisively. Behind the scenes, officials scrambled to understand how the plan unravelled so completely. Legal advisors pointed to procedural oversights. Policy analysts blamed conflicting mandates. Humanitarian consultants warned of reputational damage. Each explanation held truth. Together they revealed paralysis. Investigators reviewing the policy trail uncovered a familiar pattern. Emergency powers diluted by exemptions. Enforcement authorities constrained by overlapping jurisdictions. Accountability diffused across committees where no single decision-maker could be identified. This wasn't blocked by one ruling, a fictional senior analyst noted. It was blocked by design. As attention shifted from deportation to governance, uncomfortable questions surfaced. Who decides when pressure becomes crisis? Who defines thresholds? And what happens when every lever of authority requires consensus that never arrives? Meanwhile, the conditions that prompted the plan continued to worsen. Temporary accommodation sites expanded quietly, hotels converted, contracts extended, local infrastructure buckled under demand. According to internal data, response times for unrelated public services lengthened in high-pressure zones. Crime statistics in certain regions ticked upward, not explosively, but persistently. Knife incidents, opportunistic robberies, public transport altercations, each incident alone manageable, together corrosive. Frontline officers reported a growing sense of futility. Arrests followed by rapid releases. Enforcement actions stalled by paperwork. Community trust eroded by inconsistency. One internal survey described morale as critically low. For the public, the narrative became impossible to follow. Officials insisted systems were functioning. Analysts warned they were not. Media coverage fractured along ideological lines. What remained constant was anxiety. Parents questioned safety. Shop owners absorbed losses quietly. Residents adapted to new normals without explanation. The sense of unequal enforcement grew, not necessarily from facts, but from patterns people believed they were seeing. Two-tier justice became a phrase whispered before it was spoken aloud. Within government circles, emergency sessions multiplied. Strategy documents proposed alternative pathways, voluntary returns, diplomatic negotiations, policy recalibration. Each option carried delays. Each delay carried risk. According to internal projections, public tolerance was shrinking faster than any reform could be implemented. Polling data told a troubling story. A large majority believed the system was out of control. Far fewer believed leadership could fix it. Yet open dissent remained limited. Fear of misinterpretation, fear of social consequence. Silence filled the gap between belief and expression. That silence did not mean acceptance. Political pressure began to build in indirect ways. Local elections shifted unexpectedly. Independent candidates gained traction. Turnout patterns changed. Analysts noted volatility, not allegiance. Voters were not moving towards solutions. They were moving away from trust. The blocked deportation plan became a symbol, not of cruelty or compassion, but of impotence. Proof, to many, that no matter how severe the rhetoric, outcomes remained the same. According to one fictional internal memo, a state that cannot enforce boundaries loses credibility long before it loses control. As the weeks passed, attention drifted, but the tension did not. Every new incident was filtered through the same lens, every delay interpreted as confirmation. The boiling point metaphor became literal in commentary rooms and closed-door briefings alike. What worried strategists most was not unrest, but timing. When pressure builds without release, the eventual response is rarely orderly. The United Kingdom, in this fictional account, stood suspended between action and inaction, between rule and exception, between what was promised and what could be delivered. And the question hanging over every discussion was no longer whether the system would respond, but how, and at what cost, when it finally had no choice. In the days following the blockage, officials attempted to project calm. Carefully staged press briefings emphasised stability. Language softened. Words like reset, review, and rebalancing replaced urgency. But according to internal assessments, the shift in tone only reinforced a growing belief that authority was retreating. What followed was not immediate disorder, but something more corrosive: uncertainty. Local councils began preparing contingency plans without central coordination. Police commanders adjusted deployment models quietly, prioritising containment over visibility. Transport authorities increased monitoring around hubs flagged as emotionally volatile. These were not responses to events, but to expectations. The country was no longer reacting to incidents. It was bracing for them. Analysts tracking public behaviour noticed subtle but telling changes. Crowds dispersed faster at the first sign of tension. Bystanders avoided engagement. Videos of minor confrontations spread online with disproportionate speed, amplified by commentary framing them as proof of systemic collapse. Each clip carried weight far beyond its scale. According to one fictional internal briefing, perception had overtaken reality as the primary threat. Meanwhile, the legal barriers that halted the deportation plan remained firmly in place. Appeals multiplied, timelines stretched. The temporary pause quietly became indefinite. Enforcement units reassigned, budgets reallocated. What had been framed as a decisive intervention dissolved into process. Critics argued this outcome was inevitable, that the system had been built to delay rather than decide. That overlapping safeguards, once a strength, now functioned as a brake on action. Supporters countered that restraint was proof of institutional integrity. The public heard only one thing: nothing was happening. Crime patterns reflected the paralysis, not an explosion, but a steady erosion. Opportunistic offences increased where enforcement presence thinned. Repeat offenders cycled through courts without resolution. Victims reported disengaging, convinced reporting no longer mattered. Frontline officers described a two-speed reality: strict enforcement in low-risk areas, caution elsewhere, not by policy, but by necessity. According to internal surveys, confidence in leadership fell faster than confidence in colleagues. Trust narrowed inward. As weeks passed, public anger lost its edge and gained density. It no longer spiked, it settled. Conversations shifted from outrage to resignation. This is how it is now. That phrase appeared repeatedly in social research notes. That was when strategists became alarmed. A disengaged population is not calm, it is latent. The silent majority remained just that, silent. Polls continued to show overwhelming concern about deportation failures, border control, and public safety. Yet open debate lagged far behind private belief. Social pressure discouraged blunt speech. Platforms enforced tone more aggressively than outcomes. The result was a strange imbalance. Words were regulated, consequences were not. According to one analyst, this imbalance created a vacuum, where frustration accumulated without representation. Political systems rely on pressure valves. When those valves clog, pressure seeks other exits. Local elections became the first signal. Turnout surged unpredictably. Established parties lost ground in areas previously considered stable. Protest votes multiplied, not unified by ideology but by rejection. Analysts struggled to model voter behaviour because it no longer followed traditional patterns. People were not choosing alternatives, they were abandoning faith. Behind closed doors, discussions turned existential. How does the state reassert authority without legitimacy? How does it restore trust without accountability? How does it act decisively when every action is contested before it begins? No clear answers emerged. The fictional official once linked to early facilitation decisions remained absent from public view. No inquiry reached a conclusion. No statement acknowledged responsibility. The silence surrounding that absence became symbolic, a reminder that consequences, like enforcement, appeared selective. The deportation plan that never launched became more powerful in failure than it ever would have been in action. It crystallised a belief that systems could announce severity but could not sustain it, that governance had become performative. According to one internal memo, when deterrence is spoken but not demonstrated, it reverses. By the end of the quarter, the United Kingdom in this dramatised account was no longer at a boil, but at a simmer that refused to cool. Each new challenge, economic, social, security-related, layered onto unresolved tension. The risk was no longer explosion, but fracture. Fracture is quieter. It appears in neighbourhoods withdrawing from civic life, in citizens disengaging from institutions, in enforcement operating on instinct rather than mandate, in laws existing on paper but losing gravity. History offers a warning here. Societal collapse rarely announces itself with a single event. It unfolds through moments dismissed as temporary, measures described as pauses, failures framed as complexity, until the accumulation becomes undeniable. In this fictional narrative, the block deportation plan was not the crisis, it was the signal. A moment when pressure, authority and expectation collided, and none prevailed. What comes next remains unresolved, because the most dangerous phase is not when systems are challenged, but when people stop expecting them to respond at all. And once that threshold is crossed, restoring trust becomes far harder than enforcing policy ever was.